The morning Daniel left, Evelyn stood outside the international airport with tears in her eyes and hope in her heart. The early sunlight reflected off the glass walls of the terminal as travelers hurried past them, dragging suitcases toward departure gates. Daniel held both of her hands tightly and smiled with the same warmth that had made her fall in love with him years earlier. "This is only for a little while," he whispered. "When I come back, everything will be different. We'll finally have the life we've always dreamed of." Evelyn nodded, forcing herself to smile even though every part of her wanted to ask him not to go. Life had never been easy for them. They had spent years struggling to pay rent, skipping vacations, and putting their dreams on hold because there was never enough money. When Daniel announced that a construction company overseas had offered him a high-paying contract, it felt like the answer to every prayer they had ever whispered together. She believed this journey was the beginning of a better future. Before disappearing into the crowd, Daniel hugged her one last time. "Promise me you'll wait for me," he said. Evelyn looked into his eyes without hesitation. "I'll always wait for you." He kissed her forehead, picked up his suitcase, and walked toward the departure gates without looking back. Evelyn watched until she could no longer see him. She had no way of knowing that the man she loved had already taken the first step toward betraying everything they had built together. The first month passed surprisingly well. Daniel called almost every evening. He described the country as beautiful but exhausting. According to him, the company kept him busy from sunrise until late at night. He talked about long meetings, demanding supervisors, and unfamiliar cultures. Evelyn loved hearing his voice even if the conversations lasted only a few minutes. Whenever she asked him to show her the city through a video call, he laughed and blamed the poor internet connection. "One day I'll show you everything when the signal improves," he always promised. She believed him because trust had never been difficult for her. Loving Daniel meant believing his words without questioning them. Every evening after work, Evelyn sat beside the living room window with her phone in her hands, waiting for his message. Sometimes she prepared dinner for two before remembering she was eating alone again. She would quietly place the second plate back into the cupboard and smile to herself, telling her lonely heart that this sacrifice would soon be worth it. She even kept his favorite chair untouched, refusing to let anyone else sit there. To her, it was a small reminder that home was still waiting for him. Friends and neighbors admired her loyalty. Whenever someone asked how Daniel was doing overseas, Evelyn proudly answered that he was working hard to build a better future for both of them. Some people warned her that long-distance marriages often changed people, but she quickly defended her husband. "Daniel isn't like that," she would say confidently. "He always keeps his promises." Deep inside, she truly believed those words. As weeks turned into months, small changes slowly appeared. Daniel's calls became less frequent. Instead of talking every evening, he called only once or twice a week. Then those calls became shorter. He always sounded distracted, as if something else demanded his attention. Whenever Evelyn asked if everything was all right, he replied with the same explanation: "I'm just exhausted." The workload keeps increasing. She accepted every excuse without complaint because she never wanted to become another burden in his already stressful life. One evening, she gathered enough courage to suggest visiting him. She had managed to save a little money and thought surprising him might lift his spirits. Before she could finish speaking, Daniel quickly rejected the idea. "The company doesn't allow visitors. Besides, I'm constantly traveling between project sites. You'd spend more time alone than with me." His answer sounded reasonable, but something about his nervous tone stayed in Evelyn's mind long after the call ended. Soon another problem appeared: money. Daniel had promised to send part of his overseas salary every month, but the transfers rarely arrived. Whenever Evelyn asked about it, he blamed international banking delays or unexpected company expenses. "Don't worry," he assured her repeatedly. "They're fixing everything. I'll send a larger amount next month." That next month never seemed to come. Bills slowly piled up on the kitchen table. Rent increased. Electricity prices climbed. Groceries became more expensive every week. Evelyn began skipping small comforts to stretch every dollar she had. She stopped buying new clothes, canceled her internet subscription, and even sold a necklace that had belonged to her late mother. It was one of the hardest decisions she had ever made, but she convinced herself that temporary sacrifice was necessary for their future. Despite her struggles, she never complained to Daniel. Instead, she continued encouraging him with cheerful messages. "Stay strong, I'm proud of you," she texted almost every day. Sometimes hours passed before he replied. Sometimes entire days went by with no response at all. Yet whenever his message finally arrived, Evelyn smiled as though everything was normal. To cover the growing expenses, she accepted a second job with a local catering company. During weekdays, she worked as a cashier in a neighborhood grocery store. On weekends, she wore a black and white catering uniform and spent long hours serving food at weddings, birthday parties, and corporate banquets. The work was physically exhausting. By Sunday night, her feet ached so badly that she could barely climb the stairs to her apartment. Still, she refused to quit. Every extra paycheck reminded her that she was helping protect the future she believed Daniel was fighting for overseas. Sometimes while serving happy couples during wedding receptions, Evelyn imagined the day she and Daniel would renew their vows after his return. She pictured themselves laughing together inside a beautiful home with children running through the hallway. Those dreams kept her moving even when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her. One rainy evening, she received an unexpected phone call from Daniel. "I miss you," he said softly. Her heart immediately melted. "I miss you too. I'll be home sooner than you think." Those simple words filled her with hope again. For the first time in months, she slept peacefully, believing the lonely season was finally coming to an end. The following weeks, however, brought even greater silence. Daniel rarely answered his phone. His text messages became shorter than ever. Video calls remained impossible. Every explanation sounded almost identical to the last one: poor internet, busy meetings, unexpected travel. Evelyn noticed the pattern, but each time doubt entered her mind, she reminded herself that suspicion could destroy even the strongest marriage. She chose trust over fear. One afternoon at work, her close friend Miriam noticed the sadness in her eyes. "Evelyn," she asked gently, "are you sure everything is all right with Daniel?" Evelyn forced a smile. "He's just working hard." Miriam hesitated before speaking again. "Have you ever searched for the company online? Have you seen any pictures from where he's staying?" Evelyn shook her head. "I trust my husband." Miriam didn't argue, but her silence carried concern. That conversation stayed with Evelyn for days. Late one night, she searched the company's name Daniel had mentioned months earlier. Surprisingly, she found very little information. The website looked unfinished, and the phone number listed online never connected. She almost called Daniel immediately, but then she stopped herself. She felt guilty for doubting him. Love had taught her to give him the benefit of every doubt. A few days later, the catering manager gathered the entire staff for an important announcement. "I have excellent news," he said with excitement. "We've been hired to serve one of the biggest weddings of the year. A wealthy family is hosting an extravagant celebration at the Grand Imperial Hotel. Hundreds of influential guests will attend, and if we perform well, this could bring our company many more luxury events." The room filled with excitement. The manager continued, "Everyone selected for this event will receive double the usual payment." Double, the word echoed inside Evelyn's mind. That extra money could pay nearly 2 months of overdue rent. She immediately volunteered without hesitation. For the first time in weeks, she felt optimistic again. Maybe this was the break she had been praying for. On the morning of the wedding, the Grand Imperial Hotel looked like something from a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above marble floors. Fresh white roses decorated every entrance, while elegant musicians rehearsed soft melodies that floated through the luxurious ballroom. Staff members rushed from one corner to another, making final preparations before the guests arrived. Evelyn adjusted her uniform, tied her apron neatly, and lifted a polished silver tray filled with sparkling glasses. She silently prayed that everything would go smoothly. She had no idea that before the day was over, her entire world would collapse in front of hundreds of strangers, and the greatest lie of her life would finally reveal itself. The first guests began arriving just before noon. Luxury cars lined the entrance of the Grand Imperial Hotel as elegantly dressed men and women stepped onto the red carpet. laughing and greeting one another. Every corner of the ballroom reflected wealth and celebration. Crystal chandeliers shimmered overhead, the scent of fresh roses filled the air, and a string quartet played a soft melody that made the occasion feel almost magical. Evelyn carefully walked between the tables, serving drinks with the same quiet professionalism she showed at every event. She kept reminding herself that if everything went well, the extra payment would finally help her catch up on her overdue bills. A few minutes later, the wedding coordinator hurried toward the catering staff. "Everyone, please take your positions," she announced. "The groom is about to enter." The ballroom lights dimmed slightly and all eyes turned toward the grand entrance. The musicians changed to a joyful wedding march as guests rose to their feet with smiles of anticipation. Evelyn picked up a silver tray filled with sparkling glasses and turned toward the aisle. Then she looked up. Her entire body froze. The tray slipped slightly in her trembling hands. Walking proudly through the entrance, dressed in an expensive black tuxedo, was Daniel, her husband. The same man who had kissed her goodbye at the airport months ago, the same man who claimed he was working overseas. The same man she had defended whenever anyone questioned his absence. He wasn't alone. Standing proudly beside him was a breathtaking young woman wearing a magnificent white wedding gown. She smiled at him with complete trust, believing she was about to marry the love of her life. Evelyn could not breathe. The applause surrounding her seemed to disappear. The music faded into silence. All she could hear was the sound of her own heartbeat. For one impossible moment she convinced herself she must be mistaken. Perhaps the groom only resembled Daniel. Then he laughed. It was the same laugh she had heard across their tiny apartment countless evenings. There could be no mistake, it was him. As if sensing someone staring at him, Daniel slowly lifted his eyes. Their gazes met. The confident smile vanished from his face. His expression changed from happiness to absolute terror. He stumbled for half a second before quickly forcing another smile for the guests, but Evelyn had already seen the panic in his eyes. The bride noticed his sudden hesitation. "Is everything all right?" she whispered. Daniel nodded too quickly. "Yes. I'm fine," but he wasn't. He knew the truth, had just walked into the room wearing a catering uniform. Evelyn quietly stepped away before anyone noticed her shaking hands. She entered a small service hallway and leaned against the wall, trying to steady her breathing. Tears filled her eyes, but they refused to fall. She wasn't angry, not yet. She was simply trying to understand how someone she loved could create a lie so enormous. Every memory suddenly replayed inside her mind: the airport goodbye, the excuses, the missing video calls, the delayed salaries. The unfinished company website. Every piece finally fit together. There had never been an overseas job, there had never been a business contract. Daniel had lied from the very beginning. Taking a deep breath, Evelyn opened her phone. She searched through old photographs. There they were, pictures from their wedding. Pictures celebrating birthdays, anniversary dinners, family gatherings, even scanned copies of their marriage certificate. Years earlier, Daniel himself had insisted on uploading important documents to cloud storage in case they were ever lost. Ironically, the evidence that would destroy his lies had been saved by his own hands. Before she could think any further, Daniel quietly entered the hallway. "Evelyn," his voice barely rose above a whisper. She slowly looked at him. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. "I can explain." She stared into his eyes. "So explain." He rubbed his forehead nervously. "I never wanted you to find out like this." She gave a bitter smile. "You mean you never wanted me to find out at all?" He lowered his head. "It became complicated." "No." Her voice remained calm. "You made it complicated." Daniel stepped closer. "You don't understand. Her family is wealthy. They own several businesses. If this marriage happens, everything changes." Evelyn stared at him in disbelief. "So you sold your marriage? It's not that simple." "It seems very simple to me." He sighed heavily. "I was going to take care of you financially." She almost laughed. "With whose money? Hers?" Daniel reached inside his jacket and pulled out a thick white envelope. "There are several $1,000s in here." He extended it toward her. "Please, just leave. Don't ruin today." Evelyn looked at the envelope without touching it. "So that's what our marriage is worth." He remained silent. "My loyalty, silence, my sacrifices, still nothing." My mother's necklace that I sold because you said your salary was delayed. Daniel closed his eyes. He had no answer. Before either of them noticed, another voice interrupted. Daniel, they both turned. The bride stood only a few feet away. Confusion filled her face. I've been looking everywhere, she said softly. Then she looked at Evelyn. Who is she? Daniel's lips moved, but no words came out. The silence lasted only a few seconds. It was enough. Evelyn stepped forward. My name is Evelyn. The bride smiled politely, waiting for the introduction. Instead, Evelyn quietly continued. I am Daniel's wife. The bride blinked. I'm sorry, what? I married him 5 years ago. The bride laughed nervously. There must be some mistake. She turned toward Daniel. Tell her. Daniel said nothing. His silence answered every question. Color drained from the bride's face. She stepped backward. You're lying. With calm hands, Evelyn unlocked her phone. She opened their digital marriage certificate, then their wedding photographs, then videos. Daniel placing a wedding ring on her finger, Daniel promising before family and friends to love only her, Daniel calling her his wife. The bride watched every image in complete disbelief. Moments later her parents arrived after hearing raised voices. Guests slowly gathered around them. The wedding coordinator tried to calm everyone, but the whispers spread through the ballroom faster than any announcement. What happened? Who is that woman? Did she say she's his wife? The bride's father demanded answers. Daniel tried speaking. I was going to divorce. When? Evelyn interrupted quietly. He froze. When exactly? No answer. You told me you were working overseas. Silence. You borrowed money from me before leaving. Silence. You let me work 2 jobs while you planned another wedding. Silence again. The bride's mother covered her mouth in shock. Her father looked at Daniel with growing anger. Is everything she said true? Daniel couldn't deny it. The evidence was undeniable. The marriage certificate, the photographs, the bank transfers, the messages, everything pointed to one truth. The groom standing before them was already married. The bride slowly removed her engagement ring. Tears streamed down her face. You told me I was the first woman you ever loved. Daniel reached toward her. Please, listen. She stepped away. I don't even know who you are. She placed the ring into his hand. This wedding is over. The ballroom erupted into chaos. Guests whispered openly. Some quietly left. Others stared at Daniel with disgust. The musicians stopped playing. The celebration ended before the vows had even begun. As more questions were asked, even darker secrets surfaced. Several business associates admitted Daniel had approached them with fake investment opportunities. Old friends revealed he had borrowed money using different stories. One former coworker confessed Daniel had exaggerated his career for years, pretending to hold positions he never actually had. His carefully constructed life collapsed piece by piece. The wealthy family immediately canceled every agreement connected to him. Lawyers were contacted before the afternoon ended. Within days, fraud investigations began examining several financial complaints against him. Everything he had chased through lies disappeared almost overnight. Evelyn quietly walked away from the hotel without celebrating. She didn't feel victorious. She felt free. A few weeks later, she officially filed for divorce. She continued working both jobs, saving every dollar she earned. Instead of allowing betrayal to define her future, she invested in herself. She attended evening business classes, learned event management, and slowly transformed her experience into opportunity. 3 years later, Evelyn owned a successful catering company known throughout the city for exceptional service and honesty. Unlike many business owners, she treated every employee with kindness because she never forgot what it felt like to stand behind a serving tray while carrying invisible pain. One afternoon, fate brought her back to the Grand Imperial Hotel. This time she wasn't there as a waitress. She arrived through the front entrance as the owner of the company hired to organize one of the hotel's largest charity banquets. The hotel manager greeted her personally. Clients thanked her for her professionalism. Employees proudly called her boss. While supervising the event, someone quietly mentioned Daniel's name. After the canceled wedding, his reputation had been destroyed. The fraud investigations had cost him his career, his savings, and nearly every relationship he once valued. Friends disappeared, investors abandoned him, the wealthy future he had sacrificed everything to chase vanished forever. Evelyn simply nodded. She felt no satisfaction in his downfall. Life had already taught her something far more valuable than revenge. Real victory isn't watching the person who hurt you lose everything. Real victory is refusing to lose yourself because of what they did. Years earlier, she had entered that ballroom carrying a silver tray, believing she was serving strangers. She walked out carrying something much greater, the truth, and although that truth shattered her heart, it also set her free. Sometimes the people who betray us think they have buried the past forever. They believe another lie, another promise, or another disguise will erase what they have done. But truth has a way of arriving when it is least expected. Daniel thought he was walking toward a new beginning, yet the very woman he had abandoned stood waiting only a few steps from the altar. He lost everything trying to build a future on deception, while Evelyn gained something no lie could ever buy: her dignity, her freedom, and a future built on honesty. In the end, she discovered that broken hearts can heal, faithful people can rise again, and no amount of wealth is worth the price of a dishonest soul.